there's always more to the story. Join your host, Dr. Eric Shaw, prosecutor Ryan Frank, writer Adrian Bonenberger, and comedian Ryan Connor as they follow up on the most recent episode of Baggage. This is Carry On.
Well, welcome to the podcast, and we're talking about the follow-up to last episode, which Anna Reich was on talking about.
Can you remind me where she works, what school she works at?
August Anna, which is how I pronounce it every single time. I don't know what you're talking about. Because I cut all of that out of the episode.
Why?
What was that? Probably
don't
4 or 5
make
takes?
yourself look like a hero. He mispronounced it 14 times. He could not get it.
times.
He could not wrap his head around.
And it's literally spelled August Anna.
It is.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't even tell you how I pronounced it. Augustina.
Augustina.
Augustina, yeah.
You're
Something like that.
Nothing
Look, I've
is
said it
pronounced
before,
like that.
Something's wrong in my brain, man. I'm the dumbest one on the podcast. I don't know what to say. I can't explain it.
Hey, don't say that in the court.
Well, this is now several times I've said that. No one's corrected me, by the way. Every time I said that, no one stepped in and be like, oh, no, don't be hard on yourself. You guys are like, yep.
We're just allowing self-deprecation.
It's just like,
okay. I mean, I'm okay with it. Doesn't mean I'm dumb. I'm just the dumbest of 4 smart people.
You want us to be like, no. You so
yeah. How do you expect us to respond
It's the polite
to that?
thing to say like,
no, Adrian's the stupid one.
No, just I don't know something. Anyway,
you're like anything. Say anything.
Look, across the gambit of our host here.
Yes. Okay. So, fine.
All right.
Oh shit! Now I really wish Adrian was here because what was it? Just last week he was a commentator on NPR Morning Edition with a couple things. He uses the word gamut.
Yep.
What was the other thing he did? He said gamut, and he also said
two things that
he said
that
you have trouble with.
Either he's an adventurer, yeah, or that mentioned an adventure. And what do they do at the end of it? What do they call him? Adrian Bonenberger.
Hey man,
oh, that's gotta hurt.
It's
man.
an easy mistake.
Gotta hurt.
It's an easy mistake.
Yeah.
I called him Bonenberger the first time I ever said his last name, and I've nearly stumbled every single time I've said his name. I want to say Bonenberger.
Yeah, it's funny because like a real vindication for you, Ryan. Like, yeah, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Where I'm like, of course it's Bonenberger and Augustina Nina. Like, so it makes sense to me that it's Bonenberger, but maybe it's because my brain doesn't work right. I don't know.
You probably know how to say it because your wife has the same last name. Is that right?
That's what. Yeah, she did. Yes,
or did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how
she did.
That helps.
My sister-in-law married my brother. He's Chinese. He has arguably one of the worst last names a person can have, and she opted to go against tradition and keep her own the name she came with, so that her last name be Dong.
That's rough.
It's not a great last name, but we call it. Everyone outside the family calls him his name is Sun Tao, his actual name. Everyone in the family, we just call him Dong.
I mean, it's not if it's like a cultural thing, it's not weird. But if it is, if you have to put it on a Starbucks coffee cup, it's like, at
that point, you put
Dong.
Yeah,
your order's ready.
You definitely say Sun Tao for that.
Yeah.
The one you talked about on your last episode of the guy being called Boner and just like absolutely demanding to be called Boner.
That's
yeah. I mean, there's been, you can't make it up. We've had Justice, a variation of Innocent was the guy's last name. We have people that would rename themselves. Like, I'm gonna make this up because I don't want to. It's gonna be very specific who the person is. King, Puff Daddy. This is pretty close actually. King, Puff Daddy, Hallelujah, Jesus, Allah. Like that would be like it's on the docket. That's their name. So you got to call the name out.
That's a goddamn name right there.
This guy changed his name to this. That's crazy. And it turns out the parents probably did it actually. Like and then he kept it. It's crazy.
I was about to say, I got to be careful of this. Just in pediatrics, I come across every kind of possible name you can imagine. And some of my historical favorites, Ice-T Baby Jesus is still my favorite one. The one that wasn't bad, but just looked bad because the way like the hospital printer printed out, it didn't do like additional capitals. But when it printed out, it looked like Lady Nasty. And we're like, who names their kid Lady Nasty? And it was missing it was La Dynasty, but spelled out. It's Lady Nasty. So that was the big thing on rounds. What's up with Lady Nasty this morning?
That's tough.
So anything in her life that's all caps is going to be Lady Nasty. Even her driver's license is going to look like Lady Nasty.
Speaking of names, so I'm getting ready for this episode. That there's 22 different people that, for those who didn't listen to the last episode, check that out with Anna Reich. I Try Not to Think of Afghanistan, the author of that book, and she interviews veterans from the Soviet war in Afghanistan, Lithuanians, and there's a little introduction to all of them. And speaking of names, now I am someone that struggles with very simple pronunciation, as we've discovered. So how would you pronounce this name? Now I'm going to hold it up to the screen for you guys. Somebody read that.
Is that a C or a G?
There's so many letters. Go ahead, give it a try, Ryan. What's that name?
Is that a C or a G though? The third letter.
G.
Algamantas Baranowskis.
God damn, that's probably pretty close.
Solid.
Yeah. Anyway, they're all like that. Let me find one with something that's not a letter in it.
Okay.
Because some of them have just symbols, right?
What is this from?
This is from the book. This is from I Try Not to Think of Afghanistan.
Okay.
What's that guy's name? It's 3 words.
Is Lithuanian a Cyrillic language? Is it the same?
Yeah, it looks like it, yeah.
Belavicius is the last name. Freitas?
Man, you're good at this.
Freitas, and then I guess just Jonas, probably.
Yeah. Golly, you're way better at this than I thought you were going to be.
So I don't know if you're
reading's fundamental.
Ryan, how old's your oldest son?
He's 6.
6. Okay, so he's in kindergarten now?
Yeah, first grade.
Okay, wait till you start getting into like real grammar. And this goes into like how much of a science geek I am. And even going back to elementary school, I remember being in like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade and starting into grammar. And I was like, this is fucking stupid. I have no need for this. I don't get it. And I don't care. And even now, as a 43-year-old man, like grammar is minimally important to me. I'm not writing novels. The way you write a medical note is so specific to that. But now that my kids have to do grammar, I'm like, I don't know it. I don't know what a participle is. I don't know which one is the active. Fuck all this.
Yeah, well,
ask your mother.
I mean, I've written a book, and I think that it doesn't matter at all. It's like as long as you know how to speak.
There is hope for me. I could conceivably write a book one day.
Yeah. I think as long as you know how to speak, it doesn't matter if you know like the names for that part of speech or whatever. I don't know. I understand why they teach it, just so that you know how to talk about it. But I will say that yes, to some extent, for our younger listeners, stay in school, definitely do your homework. But if you don't have, like, I think we're talking from a point of view of having a comfortable understanding and a mastery of the language and writing it that we don't think is expert level, but compared to, this is going to make me an old man, but some of the younger generation and their writing skills, I've heard this across the board. My dad, a college professor, I've heard it from many teachers, is the ability of people to write has gone really significantly downhill. Yeah. So are you Shakespeare? No. But if you are a bad writer and you can't communicate with people, that definitely shows. We see it for people coming out of law school trying to be lawyers, trying to do legal writing. And what I tell people is like, read that sentence. Just read it out loud. Just read it to yourself out loud. And they're like, oh yeah, it doesn't sound right. I mean, you would never speak like that. Yeah. Like just basic structure of sentences is something that people definitely is important. Yeah, of course. I'm just talking about the terms. But I
that's an interesting concept. Because I'm dealing with so much like law stuff right now with business things. And like lawyers have a very specific way of writing that's almost formulaic, and doctors have something similar too. I mean, I would feel that someone even as a bad writer, maybe a good lawyer writer, because it is so kind of formulaic in the way you describe things. Is that not correct?
Yes and no. So I haven't been in law school in a little while, but they've tried to go away from the really formal and like really complex words, and really they teach you in law school, and they're trying to do it in most bodies of law where they create new laws and try to make it more plain language so the common person can understand it without a law degree. So when I write a brief, I was just working on a brief today. It's like I talk to you guys. It's not slang. I don't use contractions as much or anything like that, but it's a little bit more professional. But other than that, it is how you would speak. It is shorter sentences and making points and things like that.
Isn't the standard for public documents and like government public documents at 8th grade level?
I think I've heard you say that. I think on this podcast, somebody has said that.
For Becca, when they write their reports for the EPA, the standard is like it needs to be a little bit lower bar, and like particularly like science speak, because that is reading a peer reviewed journal is taxing for me. Anyone else, it's like if you don't know how to read it and you don't know what you're looking for, it's reading another language. Reading medical notes is another one. If you get like a document from your doctor, it's not going to make any sense to you. We write in such a very like weird way. And it really is like between the abbreviations we use and like the cadence that we use, it is like another language.
You know what it was? It was Megan on the virologist on one of our guests.
That's right.
That's where it came up. She was talking about that. And it makes sense. I mean, I don't think like that when I do legal writing, but yeah, I think certainly anybody in high school would be able to read any brief that I write, and most briefs that I read from defense attorneys, and understand what the argument is and not have to look up anything.
I mean, you should be able to. I think a lot of I don't know. I think a lot of people get carried away with writing to try to show off. Like, I mean, it's like, I don't know if you've ever read Jonathan Franzen. You read him, you're like, oh, he's a great writer. But half of this book is just him showing us that he's a good writer. And there's not really, you know what I mean? I don't know, there's this, I can't remember if this is from A Movable Feast or what it's from, but Hemingway talks about, he writes pretty simple language because he thinks that's the most effective. He says you don't want people to reach for a dictionary when you're writing. And he said he talked to Fitzgerald about it too. And he said, yeah, I know your big words, but I just don't think that they're the words that you need to get this across to the readers. Orwell says the same in Politics in the English Language. It's like things should be said in the most direct way, which I don't necessarily always agree with that. But
yeah, I mean, I'm not trying, this isn't trying to promote your book, but when I read your book, it's an easy, quick read, not a quick read, but it's an easy read. And you want to move on to the next thing because you're not stressing the brain to make the logical connections with language and everything. Like, just tell me the story.
And I'll tell you what, the first draft was not like that. The first draft was, there were sentences that you'd have to stop and count and stuff like that. And I think just based on the genre that I'm writing here, this needs to be more direct. And over the course of revision, I tried to make it so that each sentence moved. Like, I didn't want to have any just there to be.
Yeah, it's solid. It's tight. Who did your editing? Did you have somebody do your editing, or you just revised
I did,
yourself?
And Rachel read it a couple times.
Because honestly, I have written enough legal stuff and other stuff that one thing is editing. Like, I don't care how attentive you are, but you reread your own thing and you find mistakes all the time. So to self-edit is incredibly difficult.
I sent away. Right. It was like my third or fourth draft, and I exported. I'm about to send to Rachel. I think Quincy or something like that. Again, 2 typos on the first page. It
makes you question the entire book, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, is this whole thing a mess? And they were just like the most simple typos. It was like I think I had like double typed a word or something like that. These things that when you read it fast, you miss it. After that, every edit pass, I would read out loud. Mm-hmm. So I've read it aloud 4 times.
That sounds like that would be exhausting, like almost take away a little bit of the fun of writing it, right? Because you're just rereading the same thing over and over and over.
Absolutely. And I've been putting off the audiobook for a while.
When I have to look at like my old notes, which there's multiple reasons for like why I'm screwing up. Like I'm rushing to trying to get charts done. I'm trying to like create accurate information, and I'm a shitty typer as well. I'm fast, but I make a million mistakes. I'm always constantly like backspacing to try to fix it. And so when I go back to look at my old notes, there's like a dozen little like typos, nothing that's like pertinent to the information. But I'm like, it looks like a kindergartner wrote this. This is so unprofessional. Like, what if another doctor's looking at this? Like, this is embarrassing.
Now, why do you think that, not speaking of ourselves, but we know writing quality gone down dramatically? I think I think one, it's the no one's writing by hand and you're using your write by computer. And the other thing I think is because people don't read as much.
Yeah, that's sad, but true.
Those are the two to me, but this is not scientific.
Well, I don't think it's emphasized in schools as much either. I think there's a big push towards STEM stuff and try to be like what I call more practical stuff. And, particularly literature. When I say literature, I mean that more as an art form versus like a practical, iteration of it is just kind of being lost.
I see it with my kids, both my kids, very verbal pretty early because we read at least 3 books to them every single night and sometimes some extra stuff during the day. So we read to them all the time. And teachers have commented on it. And like, your 2-year-old is having like full on lengthy conversations that are like we can understand everything. I don't think he's a genius or anything like that, but I do think that he has just been exposed to a lot of words, and that translates too with our 6-year-old that he is pretty good reader. He's 6, and part of that is I think he's had some good teachers, but also it was very easy for him to pick it up because he's seen this, he's seen these words, he's seen these combinations, he's seen sentence structures so often that he can. I mean, it was pretty cool. It was, I think, a year ago in kindergarten, he read a book to his little brother, which is pretty amazing for a 5-year-old to do. But and I think the reading has a lot to do with that. So definitely want to keep that up with our kids.
Not to get too far away from the initial question there, but like we've had unfortunately the complete opposite experience with my daughter because she has a reading disability, and so we've done years and thousands of dollars of tutoring to just try to get her to be effectively competent to get through like basic stuff. But like even the therapist who did her evals, like she's never going to be a reader. That devastated Becca.
Yeah, that's gotta hurt, man. Yeah.
My wife will read. She will purposely not start a new book when she goes to bed because she'll stay up all night long and read the entire book. And when she was my daughter's age, she would sneak and stay up late to read with like the flashlight underneath the bed. And like my daughter just doesn't read, and she will never enjoy it. And it's just not something like she doesn't seek it out really. And we push books and try to get her to do stuff, but it's just, it's never going to be part of her life, which is just sad because like I love reading. Becca loves reading. And
yeah, that sucks, man. I mean, definitely you want your kids to grow up with the same experience that you had, right? And if reading was part of it and they can't have it, then, but she's definitely got her act together, man. She's a little athlete, isn't she?
Yeah. And speaking of like art stuff, this is fun. And Ryan, you'll get here at some point. I'm now going through all of my favorite movies from like the 80s and 90s with her. And like, it's just obviously like the standards like Goonies and Karate Kid. And I'm trying to think what else, like The Fifth Element, like Sandlot, like just tons of these. I want to watch Beetlejuice with her now with the sequel out. Charlie has got his boys watching. He's taking a step up. They've watched all the Terminator movies. They've watched Aliens, Jaws.
Knowing like, Charlie, his kids are like 4, right?
Well, my dad showed me Predator when I was 10. That was a huge mistake. Like I ran out of the room screaming. But Charlie's like, I think the youngest one, he's like 12. He's like, I think for Predator. I'm like,
I remember. I have a vivid memory. We were vacationing somewhere, the whole family. I have 3 siblings, so it was my parents and the 3 siblings. I was the youngest. I was probably 6 or 7, and the advertisement my parents had seen an advertisement for Gremlins, but it was always Gizmo. So they thought that's what they were taking us to see. And then, man, when they ate after midnight, I have a vivid memory of my mom picking me up going, oh my God. And I was walking out of the movie theater because it's a pretty traumatic thing for a 6-7-year-old.
I don't remember what year it came out, but the one that got me in the theaters was A Never-Ending Story.
Really?
When the wolf was scary as fuck. And when the horse drowns in the swamp, like I lost my shit and my mom had to like take me out of the theater like crying.
That's my favorite childhood movie. Okay. I got it for Christmas when I was like 4, I believe, and would watch it at least once a week until a few months ago. And so Rachel tried to show it to her niece and nephew. She would have been 6 at the time. I guess just to the niece, probably not. And Rachel's sister came and was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? She's way too young to see this," because of the horse scene. And Rachel and I were both like, "What are you talking?" But I guess it is scarring. If you're, I just rewatched it and so good. But yeah, anyway, I guess she was right.
That's a
yeah.
So some of the movies from back then were like obscenely dark, and they were marketed as like children's movies, and it was like our version of like grim fairy tales,
dude.
Like, you know, if you show them to kids now, and they're just like, "What is wrong with you? This explains so much about you."
There's one movie, I cannot remember the name of it, but it's these 3 kids that are trying to go to space. Do you remember this from the 80s? It's 3 friends from school. They're trying.
Ethan Hawke's in it.
They're trying to go to space. One of them wants to go because he loves science. Okay. One of them wants to go. I can't remember why. Maybe just adventurous. The other one wants to go because his dad's an alcoholic who beats his mom.
Ooh. Wow.
It's some. Yeah.
It's like,
River Phoenix and Ethan Hawke, I think.
Yeah. River Phoenix is in it. Yeah.
Explorers.
Yeah.
Explorers is the name of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dude, you know it's a great movie from the 80s? Not for kids, though. Broadcast News, the Albert Brooks. We just watched it for the first time a few ago. Have you ever seen it?
Mm-mm.
One of the funniest movies ever. If you get a chance, sorry, this is such an aside. Broadcast News.
We are way off the rails.
I mean, it doesn't matter at this point. We're so off the rails. This is the rails.
This feels right.
Is now. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'm at the point where I want to show like my kids like the Monty Python movies as well, and I've been on a bender of like John Candy movies with them as well.
Oh yeah.
We have movie night, and the boys get to switch back and forth between 2-year-old and 6-year-old what they get to pick to watch.
Ooh,
and I've seen Cars 50 times.
Oh my god.
So I'm trying to get him in like, Shrek, right? Shrek would be fun. I showed the trailer. My 2-year-old starts screaming bloody murder. I was like, okay, we'll watch something else.
Frozen came out when my daughter was 2. Let me tell you, I know every song by heart. I can sing them all. I hate that movie.
My kids don't like, my 6-year-old, he does not like Disney movies really. Like Cars and WALL-E are about the only things that he'll watch. He just not into it.
I'll tell you something. I have very good parents, but I think the best thing, 1, I did not know that children's music existed. I was unaware of it until I was an adult, that there was kid music. 2, I had only seen a few kid movies my entire childhood. Like proper, like, you know what I mean? Disney's Robin Hood was my favorite, like proper kid movie, and Jungle Book. The next closest like kid movies like Gleaming the Cube and like Ninja Turtles.
Oh, Gleaming the Cube? Are you
Ninja
kidding
Turtles.
me?
So I like kid movies like that, but not like I didn't get inundated in the cartoons.
How much do you remember Gleaming the Cube? Because for me,
well,
my brother was older, right? And he was a skateboarder, and I could never skate as well as he could.
Yeah.
And he was his brother was like an adult in that movie, older than him, and a Korean and adopted.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this movie's made for me. That's my life. This is my life.
Yeah.
And the younger kid is the hero, the skateboarding hero. I was like, this is amazing. In retrospect, it's kind of a ridiculous movie, but at the time, I was like, "This is incredible."
Well, dude, so mine was the same with Vietnamese brothers, and we even tried to really live out the movie, and we wanted to make a skateboard out of a street sign, but they weigh like 80 pounds, so you can't really do that. That's unrealistic.
My dad definitely was a little bit skewed on like what age was appropriate to watch movies, and I had seen like all the Mel Brooks movies by the time I was like 7, and I remember coming home from my dad's house, and like I'm pretty sure I said it to my mom, where I'm like, "Excuse me while I whip this out," and she's like, "What did you just say? What was that?"
It's awesome.
Oh man,
he showed me Jaws like right the first time before I ever went like snorkeling or scuba diving, and I'm like, "Why would you do that?
That's amazing.
That's just a dick move."
We just watched Jaws. It was Rachel's first time. It was like one of the scariest movies she's. So the fact you saw it as a kid right before snorkeling.
Oh, dude, my parents, God love them, they're great people. There was never one time they ever prevented me from watching anything. I don't think there was any supervision when it came to movies or anything like that, because I was the youngest. They were like, whatever, we can't, we had HBO with weekends, no bedtime. My parents were in bed.
Same.
Me and my brother would stay up and watch HBO. Do you know what's on HBO?
I saw
at
Eddie
10,
Murphy
11 o'clock at
Raw
night?
very young.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I was exposed to some crazy stuff because my brother is 6 years older than me. He wants to watch the violent stuff, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'll watch the violent stuff then.
Yeah.
There isn't a movie that I didn't see that was played on the television in the 80s or 90s.
No, I still remember the first rated R movie I saw in theaters, and it was Trains, Planes, and Automobiles.
Oh,
and I think I was like 6 or 7 years old, and like a friend's parent was like, "Oh, it's Steve Martin and John Candy. Like, it's okay."
So good.
Yeah. Walked across a fucking runway.
I mean, just think about the fact that when we were kids and teenagers, there was always at least one kid who was like, "You ever seen this?" And they pull out Faces of Death.
Yep. I'm sure that kid was probably you, Eric, when
No,
I was
that
in
was
high
Glenn.
school.
It was
That was
Glenn.
Glenn.
That would have been
That was
Glenn.
absolutely
That would have been
Glenn. I went to his
Yeah.
house and watched it. I think I was 13. I remember that specifically.
We used to go in abandoned buildings when I was a kid too. Like just like whatever building was abandoned in town, we would ride our bikes to it and just explore the abandoned building. And then we just go home and have dinner. Mom would say, "Where'd you go?"
That was a classic 80s thing to do. I mean, that's how half those movies start.
Yeah.
The horror movies started, like kids exploring.
Yeah. But you know, it was fine.
You know, I can tell you our childhoods were a lot better than growing up in Lithuania and being conscripted and sent to the Afghan
Nice
War.
segue.
Way to tie it together.
Nice
man.
segue.
Oh my
We've gone
God.
so
Is that
far
our
off the rails.
is that our
Half
exit?
an hour in.
I tell you what, I think Eric just sewed up the whole episode. That was perfect.
Yeah, that was real pro move.
with a bow? It's
Oh
right
my
there.
God. Expert move.
One thing we didn't actually get into because of time wise talking about the book and the last episode is that we talked in broad brushstrokes about the book and kind of the themes, but we didn't talk about any of the individual stories, which
Please
were
leave broad breaststrokes.
broad breast. We talked in generalities about the book
Breaststrokes.
and the general
I didn't even
themes.
catch it.
These are seperate audio tracks. I can just edit out everything you're saying,
it's-
Eric.
Don't
I
take
hold
the
all the
warts
power.
out. Don't take the warts out. Oh man. Sorry.
I see the numbers. I know people keep listening. It's moments like this. I'm not sure why, but thank you for sticking in there, guys. And anyway, there's some real like really powerful stuff that these guys are talking about. Some of the lines they said in here that stuck out to me is this one Lithuanian vet is saying how the conscription was like it was a two-sided genocide where the government didn't care about the conscripts. They were just dying in droves. And that is the same for Afghanis, take as many Afghanis with you as you can. And just, we really don't, I guess Vietnam maybe is the equivalent for us of just the number of losses on both sides. But it
even
was
that every
it's
loss
wild.
every loss, and even then was really felt at home, and that added to the anti-war movement. And
Right.
we had free press that was, despite some hurdles, was able to get that information out there. And halfway through the war, the tides had turned as far as like public opinion against it. So whereas even now with the war in Ukraine, Russia is just throwing more and more conscripts and meat into the grinder, and it just seems like that is kind of their political ethos or like their social contract.
Yeah.
Well, with Afghanistan, they mentioned in the book too, and Anna's book, that it was, one of the guys is talking about, it was about 6 years. Russian state television didn't talk about Afghanistan. It was a conscription service where they were taking people, non-volunteers, mandating them to go, served in Afghanistan, would go back to their home country after a couple years of service. And it's blackout. They're not even talking that there's a war even going on. So for 6 years, having a war of that level, I mean, that's crazy. The wars we fought usually don't even sometimes last that long. So to have it on the state television blacked out is crazy. And the estimates, you total for about, the war was about 10 years for the Soviets, and anywhere between, 1,500 or 15,000 and 26,000 casualties. Deaths. That's people killed. That's a lot of people to be sending home in body bags, and no one's talking about it for at least the first half of that. It's pretty crazy.
That seems very much in line with everything I know about Soviet history, though, of just, everything was tightly controlled and you didn't talk about it because there was that kind of paranoia and worry that like, oh, are you not being patriotic? Like, why are you talking about this? And
it's also diffused between different cultures too. We talked about a little bit, like you could be a Lithuanian in a unit and you're the only Lithuanian in, let's say it's a company or something like that. And it could be, maybe up to a couple hundred people, and there might not be another Lithuanian. There might be like 20 Ukrainians, a bunch of Poles, and mostly Russians. Certainly the command and the senior people are all going to be Russian.
What do you
have to
call
listen
three
to.
Polacks? I'm just kidding.
Go ahead. This is staying in. Warts and all, Ryan. Warts and all.
I just thought it would be the most inappropriate time and way to try to put humor in here.
Yeah. But no, the one of the guys was talking about, he served in a unit and there were 20 different countries. There were soldiers from 20 different countries in his unit, which is crazy to think that, to try to work as a unit is crazy. In Vietnam, they would have, we talked about it during my dad's episodes, how they would have, they wouldn't train as a unit. They would train individuals and just rotate individuals out in Vietnam. So you'd have like this one guy would come in and now he's in the unit and he never trained with the unit. Mm-hmm. That's difficult. Mm-hmm. Now add in the fact that you have up to 20 different cultural backgrounds. And I think it was if I remember correctly, it's mandated. You basically, if you grew up in Soviet society, you had to learn Russian. I know that's from Adrian and his wife, is that most people still speak Russian pretty frequently, and to speak Ukrainian is something I think the country's had to kind of work at because it was so ingrained from Soviet society that Russian will be what you learn. So I think they had somewhat of a common language, but a second language. But it's war is complicated enough, and to have those extra factors got to be super hard to deal with. Like the actual stories that these guys have to tell, a lot of it is how they dealt with it and their life before, during, and after. And it's not all about, let me say this, it's not a blood and guts book for sure. It is about talking about the human side of things, but they do share some very specific stories in here. I'm going to have Ryan Connor say this vet's name, and then I'll tell the story.
Eugenius or Eugenius? Oh, Yudvalkis?
Loved it. I think you nailed it.
I watch a lot of soccer. I watch soccer every day. So
if he's listening to this, he's like, that's me. So I think you did it right. But he was talking about how in Afghanistan, he worked as a driver in Kabul and Jalalabad. And he said drivers were referred to as dead men because they were always a target. At 2 different instances, my vehicle was shot, and both times they exploded. I was wounded, but I had to keep fighting. There was a lot of shooting and explosions. I was hit by shrapnel. Which is like, that's some movie stuff. And that's another thing about like equipment. Typically, unless you're Sylvester Stallone in a movie, when your car gets shot, it doesn't explode. And certainly military vehicles, you don't want them taking bullets and exploding. And
that also seems very Russian from everything I've ever heard.
Right? Exactly. I mean, they're talking about in the book how this one guy's job, his unit's job was, he was ordered, you will get this truck running. And there was no alternative. Like, that's a pretty serious order. You better make sure it happens. They were given no supply chain, no spare parts. The engine didn't work. It had no brakes, and it had flat tires. Now make it operational. And they did it. They got it working. And they're like, good, here's another one.
I mean, how well is that thing performing in war? With no wheels, exactly. And no brakes.
Right. And how do you feel as a soldier on how your senior staff value your life if you have to, when you're starting to get shot at,
right?
If they're giving you those kind of commands.
I guess again, everything I've ever read from Russian history is like, this is par for the course. And I mean, what's the Stalin quote of like, quantity has a quality all of its own? Like they would just throw men into the meat grinder.
Speaking of men, all right, Ryan, here we go. Let's do another one. You ready?
An eerie quote. Virginius Skimundrish.
Not your best, but it's better than I would have got. I have no idea. That could have been perfect. I have no idea. So this guy is interesting because he was Spetsnaz, which is the Soviet Special Forces. Yeah. And he's talking about in one specific valley, my group was followed by the enemy when we went scouting. There was no way to get back, so instead we had to scale the mountain at night. I could hear rocks crumbling and falling near me, not from my unit, but from the enemy. We climbed all night and rested briefly when it was morning. A helicopter dropped some supplies, and we thought we had the chance to push forward and take the highest peak. Soon after we started to move, we realized that we were completely surrounded. We all began shooting. Everyone was trying to hide, but there was nowhere to go. We would open fire as a group, then run and cover. At one point, I was hiding behind a bush. My friend was with me too. Some time passed, and we thought we might be able to move, so my friend started to look out over the top. He was shot in the chest. There was nothing I could do to help him. I tried my best to bandage him, but he was shot a second time and died. We had many casualties that day. Another unit came in for support and got us out. I mean, it's
a bummer.
Up there. That's up there with any combat experience. You know what I'm saying? And just to do a couple years and then thrown right back in Lithuania, and now whatever he ended up doing, open up a bakery, is like crazy. And still to this day, really no mental health support whatsoever. It's just wild.
We talked about this with your dad's episode, but I think this is kind of an interesting tie-in of how different the mental health aspects are afterwards for a volunteer versus a conscript. And like the kind of juggling of that, of if you're a volunteer, like you signed up for this, you wanted to do this. And even if it doesn't go exactly as you planned, you can still say, well, I did my duty and I tried. Where the conscript was like, well, fuck, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And I definitely and you come back and you're just like, what did I just do? What just happened to me? I just can't.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, you talk about U.S. vets that were drafted and some of the things they experienced. And I think war crimes in Afghanistan, I'm willing to wager, was probably significantly more than war crimes from the U.S. in Vietnam, but still exposed to some pretty terrible stuff. So now consider the fact that you're a conscript, and this same special forces guy had this experience where there would be artillery attacks on villages, and we would watch. When the heavy artillery was finished, we had to go in on foot and finish the job, shoot everyone that was left. We would fire an RPG into a house and then run in and kill anyone still alive. Sometimes we shot entire villages, no matter if there were women or children. It was not my decision. It was the orders. It was never my wish to do those things. I am personally very sorry for all those local people. They were not guilty of anything. That is not a typical story from a draftee in Vietnam, right? This is what Russian commanders, I'm going to say Russian, Soviet commanders anyway, were having people do. And then when your tour's up, go back home and get back to your normal life. And these are just the guys that were adjusted well enough to join an organization and, basically develop their own support group. How many thousands and thousands of soldiers went a different way? And they talk about it in the book. They all know people that have, killed themselves and taken their lives, or fallen down into alcoholism and drugs and other things and gotten into trouble. So, it's a heck of a thing that no human is capable of processing that. And if that kind of experience doesn't bother you, then something's already wrong with you, Anyway, Ryan, tell a joke.
I was just going to say that things have really taken a dark turn since you brought up that book. It was all light and fun, and then
we could talk about Gleam in the Cube again. I'm ready to go back to that. We can do that.
Great movie.
I think the listeners probably won't. We should reference the book a little bit.
No, you're right. You're right. I'm just saying which there's a place for that, and I guess this is the place.
I guess I'm a host on that podcast. I guess
we're gonna watch a movie soon.
Oh, anyway,
I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go turn this off, and I'm gonna go watch Requiem for a Dream.
Love it.
Fantastic movie.
We watched Battle Royale the other night. That was Rachel's first time. You ever seen that?
I heard that's great. I haven't seen that.
Never heard it.
What is possibly my favorite movie ever? Oh my god, dude, watch it.
Who's in it? What is it?
Battle Royale. It's a Japanese movie from, I believe, 2001.
Quentin Tarantino took a lot of the actors from that and put them in Kill Bill.
Oh, Kill Bill has
he's a huge fan of it.
Exact shots from that. Yeah. Even like the yellow like jumpsuit or whatever. That's from this, like the shots with the yellow jumpsuit. It's all straight out of Battle Royale. It's you will love it. Don't watch it with your kid.
Great parenting advice from Ryan Connor.
Yeah, it's brutal. Yeah, also Hunger Games is a ripoff of it too.
Like the book is a ripoff of the movie?
Yeah. Hunger Games is clearly derived from Battle Royale.
We need to tie this in somehow to like Red Dawn and let's put that together with this whole Soviet theme. 80s movies.
Yeah. I mean, there's just something really fascinating about that time period in the Cold War in the 80s. I actually just did rewatch Hunt for Red October because it's like the Soviets were like our perfect enemy. And it's really hard to get out of that mindset of like, these are people that the person on the other end of that gun equally did not want to be there, and it's still, anyway, the generation I grew up in, it's hard to put my mind in a sympathetic place with what had for my entire childhood had been the enemy. So it was a really interesting read. I said it last episode. If you are a veteran, you'll enjoy it. It's a really neat perspective. And so pick it up. Anna Reich. I try not to think of Afghanistan. It's worth the read. And
she teaches at Augustana and University.
Now you're making fun of my disability, and that's not cool, man. That's not cool. Augustana. I guess I will edit. Nobody wants to hear me mispronounce that 14 times. I stand by.
I think everyone does. Actually, yeah. I think
how
it's
you
very
put
funny.
You know how you put the little snippets of stuff from episodes that came out. You need to put that in this one.
What was the best part of Scary Movie 2? The outtakes.
Well, yeah, that's the feedback. Like the show, little too professional, little too NPR. Yeah, tone it down a little bit. Yeah, so fine. We hear you. We'll adjust. Anyway, do you guys got anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
RyanConnorComedy.com. Buy all your stuff. Look at all your stuff. Recording in Chicago, is it?
Yeah, Chicago at the Den Theater, November 22nd and 23rd. I'm also going to be all over North Carolina, September 27th through October 4th. People look that up. They're interested.
Excellent. Well, guys, good talking to you again. Everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Music for Baggage provided by Quincy Ledbetter. You can find his stuff at qledbetter.com. Graphics provided by Megan Weaver. You can find her at meganweaverart.com. Special thanks to our premium members for their support. You can become a premium member by clicking subscribe in your Apple Podcast app or by visiting thebaggagepodcast.com/support to sign up or to gift a membership to someone. A percentage of all proceeds go to charity. If you have any questions, comments, or a good story to share, please email us at thebaggagepodcast@gmail.com.